About me, I'm Paula Kaminska. I'm User Experience Director at Duesday. Duesday is a financial technology startup based in Cornwall, and I've been with them for nearly 3 years now, totally overseeing the entire user experience, but also employee experience, because these two are tightly linked, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. Now, I don't know if that works. How do I?
User tested this. I wonder if yeah, try now.
Okay. Did that work or?
Try.
Okay, yeah, that's me.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so people often ask me, how is it possible that despite my still fairly young age, I have 20 years of experience in my industry? But when I was 12 years old, I was making my first, it's 20, actually it's 21 now. When I was 12, I was making my first websites with HTML and CSS. And by the time I was 14, I was receiving first paid commissions from my mom. And back then, I was someone called a webmaster at the end of 90s, sorry. And the world was quite different back then, because there was no CSS3, HTML5, not at all. HTML4 was still quite new. So the websites were looking pretty differently than they do right now, especially that the layouts were based on tables, and tables were invented for tabular data. So you can imagine, if you don't remember, how ugly internet actually was. But user experience didn't matter at all, because the most important thing was that it was a new, exciting medium, and people were excited with what it had to offer. So they say the mantra for the .com domain era was build it and they will come. And obviously more businesses were coming to the online world, and then the mantra changed, advertise it, that you sell it online and they will come. And nowadays we live in a very, very complicated world. This doesn't work again?
I think it was me. Maybe if you just use the...
So the mobile app ecosystem is actually one of the largest industries on the planet right now. And interestingly, it didn't even exist 12 years ago. So currently, mobile apps market is extremely competitive. And it's really hard to break through, because nowadays you can build the app, but no one will come. Marketing isn't enough as well. You need to provide, I believe, a great user experience. And nowadays, user experience is not just about how users move from one screen to the other, or how they locate the call to action and proceed with whatever they have to proceed. Today, user experience design is a much bigger thing. It starts with the user, and it's more of a psychological field than IT, to be honest. Because we want to find people, and we want to find their problems, and as user experience designers, we want to try to solve those real problems. And you know, we people don't like having problems. Usually when we have a problem, we find some way around it. So we need to investigate how people solve that pain point already. Some user experience designers even look more in the past, so they are trying to predict what problems others may have in the future to design a solution to avoid them. And then when we want to provide a new solution that we want those users to use, we are talking about designing a behavioral change, moving them from one solution to the other, hopefully a better one. Then obviously user experience design is concerned with the entire process, interaction with the app, with the company, with the social media pages. It all should be part of one unified experience with unified tone of voice. And it's really, really important, because if you look at the data from TechCrunch, people use on average 9 mobile apps a day and 30 mobile apps a month. So they already have a defined lifestyle. They already use apps that support their daily life. And it's suddenly a noble place, the mobile device of the user. And we need to work out and prepare properly to get there. And data are really not forgiving, because people really respond badly to bad experiences. It's not just momentary experience when they have a bad experience with your website or app. They actually are much less likely to return. Many of them, 1 out of 3, will maintain a negative perception of the brand. They will obviously be less likely to make any transaction with you if you delivered bad experience. And 1 in 5 will even tell other people about their bad experience. So then you end up with people who never interacted with your stuff, but actually they already have an opinion about it, and it's a bad one. And I don't want to scare you, but this is data for all the age groups. If you look at the data for like young users, they are even more scary. They are even less forgiving. But I guess before I go too much into detail, I would like to clarify a couple of things, because I usually see that people use our industry buzzwords as their synonyms. We have interaction, usability, user-centric design, user experience design, and design thinking. And these are quite different things. So I would like to guide you through a couple of them and talk more about detail. So I said already that user experience is more about psychology, because it includes people's and users' emotions, responses, both physical, physiological, preferences, perception, attitudes towards any product, any system, any service, which occurs before, during, and after each use. So what it means that suddenly it's a really subjective thing. It's a subjective matter, because it's all about individual perception. And what users really care about is the efficiency of the product they use, the ease of use, the friendliness. And that's exactly what user experience design is focusing on improving this usability, accessibility, maybe even giving pleasure. So if you can probably see that it's a bit of a problem-solving field, and you already mentioned it's full of measuring how people respond to different experiences and how they could be improved. And we could do it with user-centric design, which is a design process, which is also iterative. So it doesn't happen just once. In some companies, it happens on a weekly basis. So for example, in the first iteration, we can have a designer getting requirements from a stakeholder, and then maybe creating first mock-up, let's say on a paper. Paper prototypes are quite quick to make. And we can test it straight away. We don't have to test it with the target audience yet. We can just ask a colleague to participate in a very simple usability test. And we can learn a lot about the usability of the solution we want to design. And this will inform next stages of design. So next week we can create a more detailed, for example, more refined prototype, maybe this time digital, maybe wireframes with the actual content, and keep improving. And then when we come to developing that product, we already refined it, and we also proved that this actually works and people really want to use it, which is obviously money saving, because it's much easier to fix a prototype than an actual product. But fortunately, we are quite away now from waterfall model, which was very popular a few years ago. It's quite cool if this already overlaps a bit with your product lifecycle. It's fairly common in Agile as well. And what is great about this model is that the user's voice doesn't get lost. The user is constantly part of the process, and any changes are reversible in next iterations if we discover they have to be. And then we have usability, and Jacob Nielsen was the father of usability, who came up with 10 usability heuristics. And I listed a couple of them. For example, visibility of system status. So for example, in other words, it means timely feedback. Users want to know what happens with the app system they use. For example, when we think about the website, we have a progress bar, which is progressing when the page is loading, so users can estimate when it's going to load. What I don't recommend using is this circling refresh icon, because you know something is loading, but you have no idea when it's going to happen. The other one, consistency. Conventions are very safe. It's particularly true with online shops. Every online shop, I think, works in the same way. You choose the product, you process the payment method, and then the address to complete the purchase. No one tries to reinvent the wheel, because that would be too much cognitive load to try to learn this process again. And recently, I was making a usability audit for a friend, Their company website had on the main page 4 main call to actions, large orange buttons with different text. One was saying more about our offer, the other one was saying help us choose your better product, something like that. Every single button on that page was taking me down to the bottom to the contact form. So there is something about the consistency here. It's good to be sticking with the patterns. Also user interface, libraries and patterns. And then we have control. And control is really important online because in our physical world we have physics, we have rules, we have gravity, we have directions. It doesn't exist online. We have to create handrails for users to move around. Maybe you remember in the past we were so bad with designing good menus that we were designing a dedicated page called sitemap, not for bots but for people, to help them orient themselves about the offer of the website. Later there was the next invention, breadcrumbs. So home, offer, products, stationery, category of the products, and then finally product. And the breadcrumb would show you where you are, and it would be clickable, so you could come back to any of the parent elements you want to. It's also quite old school. I think we improved much how we design menus. We also are no longer obsessed with pulling all the pages to the menu as well. Not all the pages have to be there. Some of them can be accessed through the page itself inside the content. And I'm a big fan of the undo button. So, you know, in the past, we asked the user to remove an item from the basket, let's say. We give them this opportunity. They click remove, and then suddenly a patronizing dialogue is coming up. Are you sure you want to proceed? So it's not really good from psychological point of view, and it also adds extra click. So it's much better to just allow the user to remove that item and then allow them to undo, maybe in within the next 10 seconds or forever, depending on the context. But it gives users more control. About errors and errors prevention, I still find mobile apps that offer a few options, and when you click one option, on the next screen you see big error message, this option doesn't exist, or something like that. So if it doesn't exist, why was it in the first place? Sometimes we have to show options that don't exist, but they don't have to be clickable. They can be grayed out. We can say, this is not available, but will be, I don't know, in 2 weeks' time. And it's the same with websites. In the past, internet was full of under construction pages. I don't know if you remember. There would be a website, very rich menu. You start clicking, half of the website's pages don't actually exist. They just are under construction. So we no longer do that because it's promising content which isn't there. So when we create a hope, we create disappointment if we don't deliver. And cognitive load is really important as well. So we want to minimize it. And if we ask user about something that, I don't know, let's say they're in the basket, they are on the last step, we ask some question, and we ask this question and it refers to something from the first step, it will really not be helpful if they don't know, if they have to remember the information that was in the first step. If we ask about some confirmation, it's better to lay out some kind of summary page and ask them to confirm it. And finally, design thinking, which is slightly different because design thinking is a creative approach to solving problems, and it's designed for teams. And by the team, I don't mean bringing a team of designers, but taking people from different departments or teams. So let's have in a design workshop one front-end developer, back-end developer, designer, maybe tester, product designer, maybe manager, ideally a stakeholder, someone from C-level. I find this the most useful, actually. And all the design thinking is very trendy right now. I constantly see this buzzword, and everyone is proud who starts implementing this in their business. It's really not a new idea. Design thinking existed for decades in other industries like architecture, for example. It's just very new in IT. And it helps people design really creative and innovative solutions, and at the same time builds a strong common ground. It's almost like a team building exercise. And what I like about this picture, actually, we don't spend too much time thinking what we're gonna build because everyone is already in the room. So, you know, we don't design something as designers and then developers tell us, oh, we can't do it. No, everyone's in the room, so we can actually agree pretty quickly, sort that out, and focus who we're gonna target and how we're gonna actually build it. And that actually develops shared vocabulary as well, so that we don't communicate differently, let's say, internally and externally about the products we make. And then in the design workshops, we usually end up with many different design artifacts. And this is quite visual. Specification, I think it's better when it's visual and invites to interact with it with post-it notes and so on, because it's easy to be changed, easy to come back to it, and our brain likes playing, so it will remember it better as well. No one really reads long word-based documentations these days. No one really likes it. And what design thinking also does, it gets rid of hierarchy, the very old model and the way companies tend to be run, where people who have the loudest voice or feel the most in power make decisions. In design thinking workshops, it's all about equality. So everyone can express their ideas on post-it notes and put them on the wall, and later in one of the another iterations, they can vote, and everyone has exactly the same number of votes they can give to the ideas about, let's say, what features our product should have. And whether they're a junior tester, an intern, or someone from C-level, they have the same amount of votes. And using this democratic model builds trust. And when you have trust-based company culture, people are more satisfied with their job, especially when they're involved from such early stages like this one, because here we do it before we even start building anything. People are more committed, and actually it also changes the retention data. So employees stay with you for longer. And just to finish off, I will show you a bit of data from the research that McKenzie published on October 2018. Basically, they were investigating 300 different companies from different industries over a period of 5 years. And they identified 12 design actions that some of the companies were doing out of, I think, 200 different design actions. And those 12 had a make massive difference. So the pink one are the top performance. The companies that they're doing these 12 particular design actions, and this is the industry benchmark. So they outperform the industry benchmark 2-1. And these were grouped into 4 categories. The very first one, user experience. Companies that invest in well-implemented user experience design outperform the competitors. And by well-implemented, I mean that they have a real understanding of the user and that they think out of the box, really, and maybe even out of the ecosystem. When you think about Google Pay, or I think the other one is called Apple Pay, this was a solution to a problem of people wanting to have instant access to their cash. So it was really a solution. It wasn't really just a mobile app. It was really solving a problem in real world, kind of blending the borders between the two. Continuous iteration. So encouraging employees to learn, experiment, iterate their ideas. And I think the model we've seen earlier, which was the UserCentric Design iterative model we've seen, really helps here, because we don't want to lose the voice of the user. We want user to be included in all our design phases. That basically it. And then the last one, not the third one, cross-functional talent. It's really important that user experience design is not only the domain of designers. The entire team, so also other designers, not just other teams, not only designers, believe in that and share the values and are open enough to communicate with each other. Because we still find sometimes companies where people guard their ideas or blame other departments or are not admitting someone's great vision. And that culture doesn't work, and the culture really impacts our products and their quality. So I believe we should empower people, especially designers, give them the right tools and the right infrastructure so they can do their job well. And the last one, this one is quite interesting because very common. Even nowadays, we have designer coming up with, let's say, 3 designs for the website, and they ask their manager, okay, which design are we going with? And the manager will follow their gut feeling, oh, I like that one. Well, design is not an art. We can measure everything, and we should choose the design that performs best. And I think it's quite important that designers bring it up even to C-level, the design decisions, and they need to show how much design decisions tie into business goals. So there's, I think, lots of misconceptions that we could basically let go. That was me. If you have any questions, happy to answer them now.